Hello, everyone. Glad y'all were able to join us tonight. We got us a show that we're going to be talking about Richard Allen and when was he identified by law enforcement for the Delphi murders of Libby and Abby. I hope everyone had a good Christmas as we did, and we must also remember all of those that have lost loved ones due to crime and keep them in our thoughts and prayers. But we'll get moving into our uh, case and our presentation tonight. But as always, reminder to our mods that Nightbot is working, so we don't have the prompts. And to all the people in chat, be respectful of others and of the mods. And y'all debate and bring up issues, ask questions. And after the presentation, we'll get to as many of y'all as we can. But let's go ahead and get started. As always, a little brief bio. This is Mrs. Steve, and I'm Steve. I'm a retired law enforcement, 20 years of service. Started off my career in the jail, worked the road, went into investigations, had all different kinds of training from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician, which helped my investigative career. And I've handled all different types of crimes from simple thefts all the way up to homicide. Then I retired and became aware of the true crime world and the web sleuths, and decided to try to become as good an ambassador for law enforcement as I could, and which has brought me to this channel. And as our channel grows, I'm hoping that we can have a great impact on as many cases and as many families as possible as we move forward. And I'm looking forward to the new year. And we're on our Thursday night show. We're going to be looking at the whole of 2022.
2020. Oh, yeah, oh, you're right.
For our past when we first started, and then what we've got planned for 2023 with some new programming and some new projects that we got planned, and moving into some of the code cases and helping some of the families. But anyway, on tonight's presentation, of course, we're talking about Richard Allen and Bridge Guy, and is he guilty of these crimes of the murder of Libby and Abby, and the warrants that have been issued for him. And just, when did he, one of the biggest questions and most often question I get emailed, and I see a lot of it in the comments, and there's a lot of debate out there. Exactly when was he identified? Some people, was there the potential for him to be identified the first week? We now know that is absolutely correct. That he came forth, witnesses came forth, and we have a number of witnesses, and he corroborates their stories that yes, it was him, and it was not brought or not followed up on by law enforcement to the degree that we are aware of. We of course became aware of the Ron Logan search warrants, the Kagan Klein search warrants, and all that information. But Richard Allen in 2022 just popped up out of nowhere. And what was the reasoning of that? And of course, that has led to a lot of different content by a lot of different creators. And it's been a debate. And of course, people are saying law enforcement should be held accountable. And, of what information was released and how was the investigation conducted. Well, we should all be glad of where we're at right now. We have individual that's been charged with a case. This is where we wanted to be, that we have justice for Libby and Abby, and it's being pursued, and it's in the court system now. But we're going to look at closely my opinion of when Richard Allen was identified as being the person, the suspect, the killer of Libby and Abby, of when law enforcement identified him. And people sent me all kind of different information from the original interviews that were conducted by law enforcement and the press releases in 2017, in those early days and the chaos when everything was, so dynamic, and new information and statements were being made. And during that first year of news releases, as it continued into year one, year two, and we became aware of different statements made by Carter, ranging from, certain information we had to even making reference to a movie, The Shack, which came out of nowhere. And I have a lot of people that have sent me a lot of information recently that says that was all directed towards Richard Allen. And of course, this last week I did watch The Shack and found some interesting information in The Shack. I looked at it not as from the religious standpoint. I looked at it totally from what information was within the movie that someone might have been able to correlate to Richard Allen. And if you watch the movie, you'll see that there are some interesting facts, but that's not what we're really going to get into tonight. But I did find it interesting. The movie was released, I think, March the 3rd of 2017. So it's a few weeks after, just 2 or 3 weeks after the murders of Libby and Abby. So I found that interesting too. But the book that it was made from came out in 2007. And for whatever reason, during that time period, like I said, a lot of people have gone back to that movie and sent me emails and says, law enforcement has been looking at him and this proves it. I have no idea. But from my standpoint and the way I looked at it and what I broke down, this is when I think he became identified.
Chris is in chat.
Hey, Chris, Mob Crew. I'm glad to see Chris here. He has, me and Chris are working on some special projects for the upcoming year. And so I look forward to working with him. And as we move forward and start having even a greater impact and going out and working some code cases, he's going to help me and assist me. And I'm going to help and assist him any way we can and see if we can even have a bigger impact than we currently have. And so I look forward to that partnership as we move forward. But the Mob Crew $5 super sticker. Thank you, Chris. That means a lot to us. Appreciate your support. We first get the revelation from the prosecution and from the warrants of Rich Allen's involvement. And then we hear from the defense attorneys, their perspective, and that Rick volunteered to meet with them and give them some certain information, wanted to assist the investigation and supplied them with anything they asked, about him being on the trail that day, had a brief encounter with 3 girls, of course, advised he didn't see Libby or Abby. And of course, answer some certain questions. And then from the defense attorney's perspective, he tells us that after this first contact in 2017, no one had ever contacted Richard Allen until October of 2022. So why was there a 5.5 year gap? One easiest explanation is that he wasn't on the radar for 5.5 years. I believe he came on the radar, and we'll get into it, just after the 5th year anniversary. There's an interview by Carter that will be going on that are looking at a statement that he made, which is critical in February 14th of 2022. But and that the defense attorney says that, if Richard, basically what he's saying is that he was not the focus of the investigation until a certain time and during the political season. And of course, he's going to be proceeding along that line of why they focused on them and had to make an arrest with the upcoming election, is what it appears to be that the defense is going to be relying upon. And then, of course, they have other things they can rely upon, such as the Logan search warrant and also the information from the interview of Kagan Klein and the search warrants of his. And so the defense has plenty of ammo. It's going to be a huge trial, and there's going to be a lot of data brought forth by the prosecution to why they're focusing and why Logan's not going to be involved, or why Kagan is not involved to what or certain extent, or that there is some type of conspiracy or alignment of them operating and working together, as Carter has explain these tentacles. And so we'll be looking at a lot of that. But on the anniversary with News Nation interview on February 14th, 2022, if you go to any of the on YouTube, you can look it up. And at the 10:23 timestamp, Carter is asked a very interesting question. How important a piece of this puzzle that Libby pulled out her phone and started recording regarding the image. And Carter made a statement that it says it adds a little bit of weight to a very complicated murder investigation. So I much rather have it than not. Now, what little bit of weight does it add? And if he had known what he knows now, and each of us look back, if we knew the information that we had in our back pocket, that we've got Richard Allen saying not only that he was there that day from 2017, and that we have multiple witnesses that says they saw a guy dressed just like Richard Allen said he was dressed, but we didn't have that information until 2022. But still, he says, I was out there, I went to the bridge, and I met those girls, and those girls described Richard Allen seeing a man wearing the exact same clothing as what bridge guy was wearing. So we have those witnesses. We have a witness that walked out to the bridge, and on the first platform, she saw a guy wearing a jacket, a blue jacket, and jeans. And so we have that information. And then we have another witness, and we'll be going over that a little bit more in just a few minutes as we address this. But that's not a little bit of weight. That's huge. And if Carter, from my perspective, that if I looked at this and I was having to write this to apply pressure to the suspect, if I knew all the information from all these witnesses, and we have at least 7 witnesses that put him owning them clothes or being in the area on the day of that the girls went up missing, and which is huge. It's not a little bit, it's huge. And he wouldn't have said this. I don't believe it as of the date of February 14th, 2022, that he knew who Richard Allen was. Now, that changed probably knowing how warrants investigations go, that once they became aware of, we're probably looking at somewhere probably soon after this release, and probably maybe as late as May, he became aware of exactly who we were looking at. And then, of course, the wheels start turning. We start getting search warrants for Richard Allen. We start doing surveillance. We start doing follow-ups. We start re-interviewing. They may have done lineups. There may have been so many different things and aspects of this investigation. But being part of news releases and having to write them for all different types of crimes in my career, this photo, this image is not a little bit of weight to a very complicated. And this is going to probably be one of the greatest obstacles that the defense is going to have to overcome. They're going to have to absolutely be able to defend against all these witnesses. And these witnesses include Richard Allen and include Richard Allen's wife. I mean, you know, when you look at Richard Allen's statement from 2017, that, you know, he parked at the old farm building. He was there at the trails at certain times. He saw the met females. He described one of the females, didn't speak to them. And he walked to the high bridge. He didn't see anybody. And he did see some other vehicles, and that he made no video or picture. And then, of course, Carter wouldn't have known about the October the 13th interview and what would be released later on. But he still knew that Richard Allen corroborated everything that was said by those 3 girls who met him at the Freedom Bridge. And that is going to be so huge. And I think that if Carter had made the connection, back in 2017, I think Richard Allen would have been in jail by December of 2017. I have no doubt, because you can't have that information and be aware of it and say that, oh, okay, we're going to hold off for 5 years. And during those 5 years, they changed sketches, which the sketches are a combination of, they went in a new direction. None of that makes sense if you have a suspect, a strong suspect, and you have the information of exactly who Richard Allen is. None of that makes sense. And so if it doesn't make sense, then it's really not part of the investigation. And so Richard Allen has got to overcome this first witness. And if all these witnesses, there's certain commonalities and there's going to be certain discrepancies in all of them. We covered it in another video that some of these slides that came from, and all of them are very consistent. None of them are anything contrary to what Richard Allen says. He says, yeah, I met witness 1. He says, absolutely. He met witness 2. He met witness 3. And he agrees with them that this was him and that he went to the bridge. And that is huge. It's not something light. It's not something little. It's huge. And then we have witness 4. It says that we have a car parked there, and she saw the females walking, and so everybody's corroborating. And Richard, of course, says, yes, I parked at the old farm building, which everybody is now giving credit that this is going to be the CPS building. And all of them are talking about that they saw the vehicles. She saw witness 4 actually places him on the bridge on that first platform, and which later on Richard says, yes, that was me. The times are there. Everything says I'm him. I'm it. And if, like I said, once again, if Carter had known of this and had that narrative in hand, he would have identified him way sooner than 2022. Just doesn't make sense. And if it don't make sense, it's not logical. And then we have witness 7, who says that she's seen a guy in blue jeans and a blue collar jacket walking back that was muddy and bloody. So you got all these witnesses, and then you have 2 key witnesses, probably, and these are going to be the hardest witnesses for the defense to overcome. And that's going to be Richard Allen himself and his wife. From the statements they made now, and even what Richard made in 2017, it is not, anything that's going to be an easy hole to climb out of. He places himself there. And as I've said before, if you have 3 people in any one location and 2 of them are murdered, it's not a hard jump to who murdered them if you have 1 survivor of the 3. And that's where they're going to go with this. And if Carter and all law enforcement, I'm not saying that all the law enforcement may have not have suspected or may have thought about Richard Allen, but they didn't share that information. They didn't get it to Carter until 2022, in my opinion. Now, a lot of y'all may argue that, and I hope you do, and bring whatever information, send me emails, send me comments, and we'll discuss it. But this is where I've looked at it, and I was going to address it tonight for that reason. I've been getting so many comments about it, and I thought it was only fair that as we go out and we start closing out this year, that I wanted to be able to talk about exactly when I think Carter and how it's all come, because there's certain interviews all the way up to 2022 where Carter says that I think we're going to be able to, before I retire. And that's a 2 or 3 year period when he made that statement. And so if you already know exactly who an individual is, you're not going to be making those obscure statements of how long this case may go, or that I believe that we will have it solved before I retire. You would be applying pressure to the suspect. Behavioral science units would be having a field day. they'd have him under surveillance. There'd be so much going on and focused around him that it would just be a different story. But anyway, you got any questions?
You got a few.
Okay. And always, if y'all have any information regarding this case, if you know about it, that law enforcement needs it for the prosecution, if prosecutors need it, get it to them. If the defense, if you have any type of information that exonerates Richard Allen and shows that he's not involved in this case, absolutely get it to the courts, because we want justice for Libby and Abby, and we want the right animal off the streets.
All right. And single mama 4, when you were talking about SWAT, she goes, SWAT. Ooh, I've had to swat my kids when they were younger, but that's not the same thing, huh?
No, you're correct. My mother swatted me a lot. I have a lot of side training on that.
Yes. All right. And SB 74 at Steve, does SWAT team entry leader mean you had to bust in first?
No, I was number 2. Now I was a point entry man early on, but then you leadership, you go into number 2. You're right behind the shield guy and taking those first, making those first critical decisions.
And Molly at True Crime Web, would taking notes on a pad be the standard for LE in the early days of this case, or is tape recording body cams for all interviews standard now?
Oh man, no, it's just like I was talking with Cop Facts. You know, he says I carry the notepad and the pen and pointed, and it is. I'm sure now with all the body cams and all the technologies that are out there, and we had, of course, back in those days, even, you know, from the 90s on, we had recorders, and I still have some of my old recorders that have certain interviews on them. I have, you know, some of those little micro cassettes and even the regular side cassettes from those old type of recorders. And I have books and books of note. But yes, everything used to be just like the old murder book. Everything was paper and still plays a large part in it. And if, you know, all the way up to the end of my career, there's still a lot of notations made. And you have to notate it because the evidence sheets are a paper trail. There has to be paper receipts, paper trail. So there's still a lot of, although they have different types of systems now that you have tags and codes and all different types of things. And so there is a transition out, but there's still a lot of paperwork involved.
And single mama 4, that was funny because he was swatted when he was little.
Oh, my mother said I was a nightmare.
Yeah, that was priceless. Trust me, that was priceless.
My mother said she paid for her youth by raising me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was a good kid.
Yeah.
My sister misled me into a lot of different.
I'm your sister?
Yeah.
Single mama 4, who's the number 1 guy in a SWAT case?
I don't understand.
Who goes in first, I guess?
Oh, well, now, if you got team leader, of course, you have the your highest chain of command. And it's just like any type of units out there, regardless if it's military, paramilitary, law enforcement with SWAT teams and stuff. You have a chain of command. And then you have your entry teams, and you have multiple entry teams, and you have everything to lead snipers, spotters. It's just, there's so many different moving parts of a SWAT team, and every one of them is important. Then, of course, you have your SWAT teams, and then you have your security teams that are going to be maintaining perimeters outside the officers that are maintaining SWAT. It's just absolutely amazing how intricate SWAT call-outs are. Everybody's involved, and everybody has a part to run and a role to play.
All right. And the mob crew, I'm really struggling on the young guy sketch and how it came to light. My understanding is that it came from a witness on the southeast end of the bridge before the attack. Did he cross the bridge twice.
I have seen where there's some theories that he had drove and went to the south end of the bridge prior to, and that he left and came around to the other side. If that is true, and I understand exactly where you're coming from on that, and it is something, and that's more of a targeting, that if you go to a certain location, you approach it from one location and you don't like the setup you've been seen, and you have to decide, and I'm talking about this from experience of watching on stakeouts and seeing predators that when they realize that they have been seen, how they'll withdraw and leave and may come back from a different direction. And readdress and become a threat once again. Is this what happened that day? It's possible, but yes, I understand the. Was it him or was it another party or another tentacle? We just don't know right now.
All right, and Ray Jones, referring to the wife, is she guilty also?
There's a lot of speculations out there. And there's a lot of different things from being in law enforcement and seeing and going to some of these homes and seeing some of the situations that these relationships can be. And there's certain syndromes out there. And if anyone's involved in any type of domestic violence, of course, there's hotlines and help out there, and seek that help. But was she of that? Under that type of influence? It's possible, because psychopaths, narcissistic behavior, they are absolutely controlling, and there's syndromes out there that address those issues. I'm no expert in them, but I absolutely have seen where you would give people an out and they wouldn't take it. They'd stay, and we'd have to go back, and sometimes we'd go back in the worst of situations. Josh Posh 63. Steve, are there any additional reports an officer would make after filling out a canvas questionnaire, like including that info in the daily report? I don't know what the guidelines were for that. I don't know what additional and what was the how were they assigned their assignments, how they brought it back in, who did they give it to, were they debriefed at the end of the day or end of the week? Did they have a log sheet for all the tips with all the names? I don't know how they did that, but I know that there will be, and it's taught me to appreciate that the changes that need to be made would be that not only are the tips put into any type of database, but they should be reviewed by multiple people. That every tip is reviewed by a different team to make sure that if that tip does come in, that if you open it up and you see it and you expose it to the more people that get to see that tip, the ability for one of them to make a connection is greatly enhanced if it's seen by more than just one person. And was just one or two or three people just entering all the data, and they were just, that's all they did, and they weren't able to evaluate. And if one of them entered in the information from the three girls, but then across the room at another cubicle, someone entered in the information about Richard Allen, and then you go to another cubicle and you have someone enter the information about seeing the guy on the bridge. So if you had three different people entering that information, you can see the disconnect. And so taking it and making sure that all the tips are reviewed by more than just one individual would probably have assisted it. And is that what happened when they finally solved it? I believe probably so, that there was another team that came in there with the new eyes. And when they saw that and they started at the beginning and they came across that information, that it clicked, that they got to see all the critical information from that first week. And that's what brought us to this day.
And Purdue RN, doesn't the conservation officer have responsibility to escalate his interview?
He had information from, and it is, it drives you crazy to think that, he got that information, but how many interviews did he do that day? How many interviews did he do that month? How long was he assigned to that case? And what was his duties? And when did he become aware of the 3 girls' information? He may have never, we really never got when the first information came out of him wearing certain clothing. When the picture came out, it is at that point that all of us in perfect hindsight can go and say that, well, you knew that there was a man on the bridge, a man that told you he went to the bridge. But we also had other information about there that there was other people that went to the bridge, some of the family members, the caretakers, the older senior brothers, a man and woman. There were several people that went to the bridge, and it was lost in that initial confusion, and it's a terrible thing.
And Snarky Sass Angel, if no DNA match, then what?
I hope we do have, but if not, I think that between, we've got these 7, 9 witnesses, and I believe there's going to be a lot more. We haven't even got into the state's expert witnesses that they're going to bring in, and that will be everything from the firearms experts to voice analysis to all the other interviews that were conducted and interviews of friends of Richard Allen. The witness list is going to be huge on this case because whatever the prosecution, and I believe they're going to have a lot more, and they're going to be interviewing a lot of others. And, what did Richard Allen tell his friends about the biggest crime that ever occurred in their hometown that he lived a mile from? Did he ever speak of it? And if he didn't speak of it, what does that mean? And, and that means, and however they can get that information to that jury. And when they get that information to that jury, how would the jury weigh it?
Let's see here.
Because we have to look at ourselves in our own lives. Have you ever been anywhere where there was a great tragedy and you didn't speak of it? And you didn't say, this is how I was involved. This is what I did to help. And this is how come I know what I know, that I was there that day. And if he admitted that to a lot of people and that comes to court, we'll know about it. But if he didn't, then that tells a story in and of itself.
All right. And Single Mama 4, did a lot of witnesses see Allen there?
Witness 1, 2, 3 absolutely are corroborated by Richard Allen that yes, 1, 2, and 3 says that he was there. Richard Allen says he's there. So we got 4 people that says he's there. Then we got another one, witness, I believe number 4, that says that when she walked out there to the bridge, that later on in 2022, he corroborates her story. She says, I went out there and I saw a guy on the first platform. So Richard Allen says in 2022, yes, I was on the first platform. So he corroborates 1, 2, 3, 4. He doesn't mention anything about number 7 who saw him on the road, but his wife also says, hey, he owned clothing like that. And so, yes, there's a lot of people that support Richard Allen's statement that he was there that day.
Okay. And Mindy, do you think someone was trying to cover for RA, deliberately hiding him, placing himself there? The people running the show over in Delphi get more shady
The deeper you dig.
Okay, the deeper you dig.
You know, I don't believe so. Not to, is it possible? Of course, there's if there were people covering from him, was that family members or otherwise? Was it law enforcement? I don't believe so. I think it was just a. Now, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing, and there's going to be a lot of speculation. But in my personal belief, when it comes to killing children, no, I don't believe so.
And Molly, would a complicated case have something of a timeline for arrest, conviction, etc.? Like this will take several months, a year, something like that before the public knows.
I wouldn't expect to see or knowing a lot. We're going to have, there's certain trials and certain court dates that will be coming up that they're going to, and it depends on what that judge allows. And it depends at what point and if cameras make it into the court. But it may be 2 or 3 years before we know the details about this case. I wouldn't be surprised that it's 2024 before they go to trial.
And Nancy, when did the witnesses come forward, and how was RA's initial testimony missed and eventually found?
Well, we know that they would have started the canvassing and of everyone. Once that first witness came forward that says, "Oh, I saw a bridge guy," then of course they would interview them and say, "Who else was there on the trail that you knew that day? Who else did you see?" And that's when it starts expanding from the first interview. When you have one individual, it says, "Well, I was there on the trail with 2 of my other friends." Then it expands from there. And that would have been, you know, they would have, and they did. They made a call for anyone that was on the trails that day to come forward. Even when you look at the attorney that Rick came forward and volunteered to meet up with a conservation officer. So the attorney for Richard Allen says that he came forward. And so not only did he, but other people in the community would have stepped forward. And then it just goes from there. Then we have that camera that, you know, on the road that supports a lot of this information. And of course, those people at the store, they're going to play a part in this case also.
Okay, and we've already done that one.
Okay.
Do we already do that one? When do the witnesses come forward?
Yes, that's one I just did. So 2017 is when they first, within the first day or two, that's how it always comes out in these homicides.
Okay, and Cincy, if there are 2 killers, RA didn't do it alone, would we not have been told there was evidence of more than one killer? Surely after this amount of time, they would say for public safety.
Yes. And what do they mean by tentacles? Is this people that may have played a part, and what part did they play? Was it just from the Anthony Shots account? Was it alibis? Was it family? Was it friends? There's a lot of different things that could play different parts in this. But I agree with you that if there was and is someone out there that's a threat to the community, law enforcement should advise them.
And Deep Waters 333, didn't the police spokesman say it was just a younger composite of the original sketch?
Well, you know, they give out this 18 to 40, I think. I mean, you know, you're looking at a 22-year possibility of what the person may be. And that is not indicative that you're focused in on one individual. If you knew Richard Allen's age range, and you knew that he was a person of interest and was a suspect in it, to apply that pressure and to tell him and let him know, you would have put it that how old he was at the time.
Okay. Trying to catch up. And Anna, if he didn't act alone, he can tell us who else was involved.
And that And if there is others involved and how they're involved, that's an excellent point, because that comes up. Just like with the CSAM and Kagan Klein, that the closer it gets to that court date, the more they come forward and the more they cooperate, because the consequences of those deeds he did, and how can he lessen time served and avoid certain penalties. And so that's in the future. The closer we get to court dates, the more likely something like that could happen.
Okay. And Joan, does it seem strange that he proceeded after so many people saw him? I feel there was a time urgency and that the girls posed a threat.
Absolutely. But, we're dealing with individuals, when you're dealing with a psychopath, narcissistic, and what was what influences and what fantasies and what drove him to do this crime. Was that part of his fantasy? You're dealing with people out there that don't think the way normal people think, and especially someone that would kill two innocent children. And so, yes, it's very confusing that you would think that his instinct to not be caught, which he, for 5.5 years, he wasn't corralled. And did he think that he got away with it? Probably so. But what made him proceed that day? Hopefully we will find out.
And Rose, looking forward to discovery. Will we hear any of it?
Oh, I'm sure. Yes, we will, because even the discovery will be done, and there'll be hearings and stuff, and then as we get ready for trial, some of that information will be out there.
Okay.
Now the judge is going to seal as much of it as they can, but will they be leaks? Probably so.
And Anne, one question I think RA's lawyers will ask each of the witnesses is, how many times have you been in the Delphi CVS?
I believe you are correct. I absolutely agree. And of course they could have been there, and how often did they interact with him?
And tax cut. The conservation officer saw the presser and didn't remember RA interview 48 hours before.
Yes, and that's something that will be asked and answered in court. And that will be an interesting exchange of information. I look forward to it. Because I'm curious.
Okay. And Jen saves dogs. I love that. Wouldn't LE think to go back after 5 years to talk to the people again who said they were there that day? Have they now gone back to all of them?
I would expect so. Times change, and they will see, what their memories are, any other new information, and what additional witnesses are out there. And but yes, it's very dynamic, and they would go back and make sure that all the information is recalled and is it supportive of what they originally said.
And Deborah Young, great to see you.
Yes.
Mr. Steve, do you think at some point they will have a lineup for the witnesses? My gut has been the same for 5 years.
I don't even know if they need it, because you've got to, you've got 3 witnesses that says this is the guy that we saw. Then you have the guy that they saw says that was me. So there's really not a lineup needed for that. Now, will they offer it? And what is the risk of that? And is it worth, saying that, well, they still couldn't pick him out? and what pictures do you use? Because how much does Richard Allen currently look like the guy from 5 years ago? And where would you get that information, and how accurate would it be? And so, and how many times have people seen Richard Allen now? And so doing a lineup right now from this point on would never make it in court because he's been in the news so much. Who couldn't pick Richard Allen out of the lineup right now?
Mm. And truffles, those are yummy. How did the conservation officer meet with Richard Allen, and when did that meeting take place?
His Richard Allen attorney says in 2017 that's where the original went, and it was at a store that Richard wanted made the contact to set up the meeting, or that's where the meeting was chosen, but it happened in 2017. Don't know the exact date and time, but it's on that canvassing report.
And Joan, the conservation officer should have run to give a report on someone who was on the bridge. Who assigned him the job and didn't follow up? This had to be the biggest case he was ever involved in.
It's the biggest case a lot of officers ever been involved in. And you are correct. Even in the state, and it's the biggest case in a lot of different ways. It led to the CSAM. And of course, you've got the murder, and then you've got additional possibilities of other involvement in other cases by Richard. And so, yes, there's so many huge things about this case.
In SB 74, did we see the entire probable cause, or were the 8 pages just the portion released?
I believe we saw all the probable cause for the arrest. I think the last page, I think there was a number off, but and that was just a signature page. But the probable cause affidavit appears to be released. I am very much interested in the search warrant and the search warrant affidavit and the search warrant return to see what was collected from Allen's residence.
Okay.
Oh.
My star didn't start. All right. And Truffles, the statement that Richard Allen made to the conservation officer was not a sworn one?
No, and it doesn't have to be. You've got someone that's coming up, and all of these witnesses, it's not a deposition of any sort. When you meet with a police officer and you give a statement, you give a statement. But for the courts and for depositions, and there's certain times to be sworn in, but typically during these investigations, it's not.
All right. And Rose, why do you think LE in and out of CVS did not recognize RA or his voice?
I have no idea. Voices, how close is it to his voice? I really don't know. Some people can hear tones and different variations of them. I can't. So I don't know.
We have several questions about when RA went to rehab. Do you know if it was after he talked to him?
I don't really know, but I do. I know that's been put out there, that at some point he sought assistance for some type of alleged abuse of alcohol. Don't know if that's true or not, but I know that was part of the rumor mill, and there may be some basis within that, but I really don't know. And would that information make it before the jury? We don't know. They'll have hearings on certain reports and things like that. So until it gets before that jury, we're going to hear a lot of things, and the jury can only weigh what gets before them.
And like Josh the Posh says, the voice clip we have so far of BG, in my opinion, wouldn't help me identify anyone. It was, it was so short.
Yeah,
I mean,
that and that is actually
know?
sounds. I mean, people have argued that it's two different people, even that one
Right.
voice print, because it has almost two different tones to it. To me,
Not enough
Yeah.
time. All right. And missed siren. Why do you think the person taking the initial report wouldn't have pressed detectives regarding his contact, especially after video?
I have no idea. And other than working on these cases, how many of these canvassing reports did he do? I mean, did he do 20 a day and 600 in a month? We don't know. I mean, we had thousands of tips that came in. Now, of course, of people that said they were past or going down the road or were on the trails that day. I mean, you're talking about an area that we visited, and I think total number of people we probably saw there in our 3 or 4 days is less than 10 people.
Oh, yeah.
So,
but it was frigid.
Yeah, yes, it was, and it would have been. We're looking at a school day there that really you're probably only looking at the most people that would have been on that trail or reported being in the area is probably well less than 100 during that day or drove down that road, or even if you multiply it by 10, we're talking about 1,000 people. And I don't think it's anywhere near that. And how would this one tip out of the people that said they're in the vicinity get missed? It is absolutely, mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm. And Purdue RN, the FBI LE must have additional information leading to RL involvement, don't you think?
Well, that's going to come out. I mean, there's still to this day, there's certain individuals that are on the Ron Logan train from law enforcement and the FBI that they're, still that he's involved. I have no idea of why they're saying that, or, if you take the Ron Logan search warrant at face value, then of course you would be on that. And now you've got to decide which probable cause affidavit is correct. Was the FBI correct, Ron Logan, or is are they correct now with Richard Allen? And it's a different departments. We got two different departments, and who's correct? Just don't know.
All right. And Anna, problem is most of us and LE2 can't help but think killers are abnormal. We don't suspect a family guy who works with the public at CVS who has owned a home in a small town for over a decade.
And
that's
yes,
so scary.
And hiding, I mean, you could not describe hiding in plain sight better than that statement, because that's exactly what he did. That will, play huge in the, that part of the trial. That is he innocent or is he guilty? Was he hiding in plain sight or not? It's going to be interesting.
All right. And Elaine, Mr. Steve, what is the meeting between the conservation officer and Richard Allen set up? Like an appointment? I was under the impression that this was a chance meeting in a parking lot of a grocery.
If we read this statement here, where it says Rick volunteered to meet with a conservation officer, which means that at some point there was contact between LE and Rick volunteered to meet them outside of a local grocery store to offer up his details of his trip to the trail on that day. And so, you don't volunteer to meet unless there's some type of appointment set up. I don't believe it was a chance meeting. If it was, the attorney has given out a different type of meaning of what he believes a chance encounter is, because he's saying that Rick volunteered the information and that Rick played a part in setting up the meeting. And is that just defense tactics? Could be. But no, whenever you're, it's just like answering the phone, or, interviews are just, we do them all day, every day. Our lives through communicating is nothing but interviews. When you go and order breakfast in the morning at a restaurant, that they ask you certain questions, they're interviewing you to what you want for breakfast. The trading of information, that's all it is. That's what we do. Our lives day in and day out is a simple form of interviews of how was your day, what was going on, what happened. And interviews are that. I mean, that's just how we communicate day in and day out. That's how we communicate as humans. And this would have been much the same, but it would have had a goal of what happened on a specific day while you was on the trails at a specific time. And this is what Richard gave the conservation officer.
All right. And Jen Saves Dogs. Is the story of them digging up the family cat been confirmed as fact, or that isn't available info yet?
That is part of the rumor of what they were there. We don't know. That's come the return of the search warrant. If we ever get the affidavit for the search warrant and that return, on the return, which simply is that law enforcement, when they go to a house, they serve the search warrant to the inhabitants and owners of the property, and put them to the side, and they go in and collect whatever they've requested: hair, fiber, evidence, guns, ammo, clothing, whatever was in. And it probably going to run a lot of similarity to the Ron Logan search warrant, that whatever was in there from the digital devices, recordings, that they would be able to, because you read the Ron Logan probable cause, then you look around your residence, you'll see they can just about take anything and everything from your animal hair, your fibers, your clothing, your body fluids, your electronics. So they can just about take everything. So I believe that the Richard Allen search warrant is going to be very similar. And the importance of the return is that they, after the search warrant is served, you have a set amount of days before you notify the courts that this is exactly, we served that search warrant, and this is what we collected. And so that way, when the discovery comes out, there is a record detailed of evidence that you went to the residence and collected. And within that, then we'll know if there was a cat exhumed and collected, because it would be in the search warrant's return. It'd be listed out.
And Josh the Posh, why would they ask RA in 2022 if his conversation with the conservation officer was recorded?
I'm sure that, they just dotting their I's and crossing their T's, and he didn't know if it was or not. And, the attorneys are, and it's quite, obvious that the attorneys are hoping that it's not recorded, because if it's recorded, you're going to be able to hear his tone, his inflections, and, more than just notes and what's scribbled on a notepad. And so that's going to be a big fear of Richard Allen and the attorneys, because just like that image, that if you only had to go by the witnesses describing, and we never had that image of Bridge Guy and everything that matched up with Bridge Guy that was described by the witnesses, everything that's matched up by Richard Allen that is in that image that he says he owns and wore that day. And that image is important. It would be the same with a verbal conversation that's recorded, that if that conservation officer, and there is a tape out there exists of that, that's something that the defense is going to have to overcome. And I hope there is. Man, that'd be absolutely unbelievable.
And Miss Siren, do you think KK was a move by LE to move this case?
If this linked, absolutely. If not, I mean, were they just following out a parallel investigation? And that is possible. But they certainly invested a lot of time, effort, money into the Anthony Schatz account to see and gather information. And even then, on the 5-year anniversary, when Carter talks about Caden Klein, that it did open up, and we have been able to recover so much information from that avenue of going in that direction.
You're done.
I am done. Well, guys, is anything else that got or not? You got on the Cyclops. What was it?
Cyclops, we've added 2 new states in the past 7 days, working another one. So that should be coming in the next week or so. That looks good. What else you got? We're having a show Thursday.
Yes, we're going to do a show on Thursday, looking at from the start of our channel and what has brought the 2022 year has meant to us, and we'll be reviewing some of the cases and talking about some things and some of the cold cases, such as Evansdale, Larry Crum, Amber out of Texas, and be talking about those and the importance of what our community and our supporters and what impact we hope to have in 2023. And most certainly we thank all of you out there. You know, it's been quite the trip, and we've been on quite a path to this day, and we look forward to the next year. And like I said, I hope everybody had a great year, and I hope 2023 is even greater. And I hope everybody had a nice Christmas, and we just thank everybody.
Molly's asking, can you give the schedule of lives for the holiday week and member lives? Are you doing member lives this week? Or
yes, I will. We will do a member live. Let's see, tomorrow's Wednesday. Mm-hmm. We'll do a member live for all our members tomorrow at 7. And then we will, I normally do that on Sunday, but we missed this last Sunday due to Christmas. So we're going to do one on Wednesday to close out the year for our members. And then Thursday, we'll do our regular show talking about our path to this, where we're at now. And then New Year's Eve, I think, is on Saturday. So we won't be doing anything.
We'll be busy. Go Dogs.
But we will be, I've got a new schedule about what we're going to be doing in 2023. We're not going to be cutting back on any shows, but I will be adding a new a show at least a couple times a week to additional audience time period, because there's people that, of course, on the West Coast and on the other side of the world that the 8 o'clock doesn't address, and they're having to watch. And so we want to be as open and create as large an audience and have a bigger impact as we can. Josh Posh, just wishing happy holidays to you, Mr. and Miss Steve. Thank you for helping us make sense of these situations. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your support. It means a lot to us, and we hope to have that great impact next year. I've got a very busy January ahead of me. I've got a lot of traveling I've got to go do in some cold weather. And
not me.
Not her. If we can get, if not, I'm going to be just heading out to Texas. But if I can get up north, I got to go up there. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, and looking forward to seeing y'all tomorrow night and Thursday night.
Thanks, guys. Love y'all.
Take care. Be safe.